Act 1. The Rage of Achilles. The Trojan War had lasted nearly a decade. The Greek armies, united under King Agamemnon, had sailed across the sea to retrieve Helen, the wife of Menelaus, who had been taken by Paris of Troy. What began as a war over a woman had long since evolved into a bitter, drawn-out conflict of pride, power, and attrition. Among the Greeks, the greatest warrior was Achilles. He was unmatched in strength, speed, and skill. As the son of the sea goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus, he was more than just a soldier. He was a living legend. His very presence on the battlefield could turn the tide of war, and both friend and foe knew it. But for all his strength, Achilles was not a man to tolerate disrespect. Tension had always simmered between him and Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek coalition. Agamemnon ruled with absolute authority, but he lacked diplomacy and often let his pride override his judgment. The conflict between them reached its breaking point when a plague swept through the Greek camp. The cause was clear. Agamemnon had taken a woman named Chryseis, the daughter of a priest of Apollo. The priest had come to ransom her back, but Agamemnon had refused. In response, Apollo sent disease into the Greek ranks, and men began to die in large numbers. Achilles called a council and demanded that Chryseis be returned to her father. Agamemnon eventually agreed, but not without asserting his dominance. He demanded compensation for his loss and announced that he would take Briseis, a woman who had been awarded to Achilles after a successful raid. Briseis was more than a prize to Achilles. She had come to mean something to him personally, and taking her away was not only a private insult, but a public humiliation. Agamemnon had wounded his pride in front of the entire army. Rather than retaliate with violence, Achilles chose to withdraw. He returned to his tent, refused to fight, and told his men, the elite Myrmidons, to stand down. He declared that he would no longer lift a finger in a war led by a man who disrespected him. His absence from the battlefield was immediately felt. The Greeks struggled without him, their morale faltered, and their lines began to buckle under Trojan pressure. Leading the Trojans was Hector, the eldest son of King Priam. He was everything a warrior should be, brave, dutiful, and loyal to his family and city. Unlike many others in this war, Hector did not fight for glory. He fought to protect what he loved. Under his command, the Trojans launched a series of successful counterattacks, pushing the Greeks back toward their ships. From his tent, Achilles watched the chaos unfold. The sounds of battle carried across the camp, but he remained unmoved. No appeal from Agamemnon, no amount of treasure could make him forget the insult he had endured. The Greeks sent envoys to him. They pleaded for his return. They offered apologies and generous rewards, but Achilles would not yield. His sense of honor had been trampled, and no offer could restore it. Even as the Trojans began to threaten the Greek fleet, Achilles remained in isolation. The other Greek warriors fought bravely, but none could fill the void he had left. There was only one man who had any hope of reaching him, not with gifts, not with power, but with love. That man was Patroclus. Act 2. The death of Patroclus. Patroclus had known Achilles for most of his life. He was not as powerful, not as famous, and certainly not as feared, but he understood him in a way that no one else did. He had stood beside him through childhood, exile, and war. While others saw a warrior touched by the gods, Patroclus saw the person beneath the armor. As the Trojans pressed closer to the Greek ships and the sounds of battle became deafening, Patroclus could no longer bear to sit idly by. Men were dying. The camp was on the verge of collapse. The Greeks were days, perhaps hours, away from total defeat. He approached Achilles and begged for permission to enter the fight, not as himself, but wearing Achilles' armor. He believed that if the Trojans thought Achilles had returned to battle, they would retreat. The mere sight of that legendary armor could turn fear into confusion and buy the Greeks enough time to recover. Achilles was torn. He had vowed not to fight, but he had never forbidden Patroclus. Still, he knew the dangers. He warned his friend to drive the Trojans back from the ships, but not to pursue them beyond the plain. Do not try to take the city, he said. Come back to me when the danger is past. Patroclus agreed. He put on Achilles' armor, and with the Myrmidons at his back, he entered the battlefield. The effect was immediate. Trojans fell into disarray, the Greeks rallied, the tide shifted. Warriors on both sides believed that Achilles had returned, and for a time it worked. The Trojans were pushed back, fires were extinguished, lives were saved, but Patroclus did not stop. In the heat of battle, driven by adrenaline, rage, and perhaps a longing to prove himself, he disobeyed Achilles' warning. He chased the Trojans beyond the ships, across the plain, and all the way to the gates of Troy. It was there that his fortune changed. The god Apollo, who favored the Trojans, struck Patroclus from behind, dazing him. His armor, too large and unfamiliar, weighed him down. A Trojan warrior named Euphorbos wounded him, and then came Hector. Believing he faced Achilles himself, Hector struck the fatal blow. As Patroclus died, he revealed his identity and delivered a final warning. You will not live long after me. Achilles will come for you. When the armor was removed and the truth was known, Hector understood what he had done. He had not killed a demigod. He had killed his closest companion. News of Patroclus' death reached the Greek camp swiftly. When Achilles heard, he did not speak. He did not move. Those who came near him said he looked like a man turned to stone. But inside, something irreversible had shifted. The rage that had once been directed at Agamemnon became something darker. Patroclus hadn't died for politics or for strategy. He had died because Achilles had refused to fight, because of pride, because of stubborn silence. Grief overwhelmed him. He tore his hair. He collapsed in the sand. His cries echoed through the camp. Thetis, his mother, rose from the sea to comfort him, but nothing could ease his sorrow. He vowed that he would return to battle. Not for the Greeks, not for honor, but for Patroclus. The war was no longer a campaign. It was now a personal vendetta. He would kill Hector. But before he could return to the field, he would need new armor. The old set had been taken by Hector from Patroclus' body, so Thetis went to Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, and begged for a replacement. What Hephaestus created was unlike anything the world had seen. The armor gleamed with celestial light. The shield depicted not only war, but peace, weddings, harvests, cities thriving in harmony and balance. It was a reminder of everything that had been lost in this conflict, and it was a warning of what Achilles might become. When the armor arrived, Achilles put it on. The silence that had once marked his withdrawal was now the silence before a storm. He was ready. Act 3, the duel and the desecration. When Achilles stepped onto the battlefield, it was as if the earth itself shifted. The Greeks, exhausted and disheartened, saw him return in armor more radiant than before. The Trojans, upon seeing him from a distance, felt the same cold fear they had known years earlier, the kind that stopped the heart before the sword ever touched it. Achilles did not rally the troops. He did not shout speeches or raise banners, and he walked into battle with one goal: to kill Hector and avenge Patroclus. The gods, watching from Olympus, reacted with unease. They had shaped the war through their influence, sometimes favoring one side than the other. But Achilles, in his grief and fury, had become something unpredictable. Even Ares, god of war, seemed reluctant to stand in his path. Achilles cut through the Trojan lines as if they were made of paper. No man could stop him. He killed with precision, not recklessness. He did not fight for territory. He did not wait for surrender. He was a storm guided by loss. He reached the banks of the river Scamander, where Trojan forces had regrouped. There, he killed so many men that the river itself rose in protest. The god of the river, furious at the slaughter, sent waves crashing toward him, trying to sweep him away. But even the river could not drown him. He climbed the banks, drenched but undeterred, and kept moving forward. Eventually, the Trojans fell back behind the city walls, all except Hector. Despite the pleas of his father Priam and his wife Andromache, Hector chose to remain outside the gates. He knew this moment had been building. He had killed Patroclus, thinking he was a Achilles. Now the real Achilles was here. As the two warriors faced each other, silence fell over the battlefield. No army moved, no gods interfered, and then Hector ran. Around the walls of Troy he fled, and Achilles chased him. 3 times they circled the city, with Priam watching from the towers above, praying for his son. On the 4th lap, the goddess Athena, disguised as Hector's brother, intervened. She tricked Hector into stopping, convincing him he had an ally at his side. Hector turned to face Achilles, thinking he was not alone. He was wrong. They fought, but it was not an even match. Hector had strength, but Achilles had rage and divine armor. The duel was brief and brutal. When Hector fell, he asked for his body to be returned to his family, to be buried with honor. Achilles refused. He drove a spear through Hector's chest, lashed the body by the ankles, tied it to his chariot, and dragged it across the dirt in front of the gates of Troy. Gasps echoed from the city walls. Priam fainted. Andromache collapsed. The people of Troy watched their prince reduced to dust and blood. Achilles returned to camp with the body trailing behind his chariot. He did not stop. Day after day, he dragged Hector's corpse around the funeral pyre of Patroclus. No ritual, no mercy, no rest. But desecration did not bring peace. Each morning he woke and felt no lighter. Grief and rage do not cancel each other out. They only dig deeper. It was then that the gods decided to act, not by punishing Achilles, but by sending someone who could remind him of what it meant to be human. That someone was Priam. Act 4, the father and the enemy. The body of Hector had not been buried. Day after day, Achilles dragged it around Patroclus' funeral mound, determined to dishonor it completely. But no matter how much dust and blood stained the corpse, his grief did not lessen. His rage did not quiet. The Myrmidons, once so proud to follow him, now watched in silence. There was nothing heroic about it anymore. Far inside the city walls of Troy, King Priam mourned. He had lost many sons in the war, but Hector had been the heart of his household, the one who fought with dignity and loved without conditions. Priam had ruled for decades, but no crown, no wisdom, and no prayers had prepared him for the moment when his son's body was left in the dirt, unburied, outside his gates. Then the gods intervened. Zeus sent a message through the god Hermes. Priam was told to go to Achilles in secret, under cover of night, and ask for Hector's body. He was not to bring soldiers. He was not to speak with pride. He was to go as a father, nothing more. And so he did. Old, frail, dressed in simple clothes, Priam rode a small wagon pulled by mules. In the back was treasure, ransom to offer in exchange for his son. Hermes, disguised as a young man, guided him through the Greek lines unnoticed. He reached Achilles' tent alone. No guards stopped him, no warriors challenged him. And when he entered, he stood before the man who had killed his son. Achilles looked up in surprise. Before he could speak, Priam dropped to his knees. He took Achilles' hands in his own and said, "I have kissed the hands of the man who killed my son." The tent was silent. No one moved. Priam reminded Achilles of his own father, Peleus, still alive, still waiting for a son who might never return. He asked for no favor. He offered no threat. He simply asked for his son's body so that Hector might be mourned and buried properly. For the first time in days, Achilles began to soften. He wept, not only for Patroclus, but for his father, for himself, and for the man kneeling before him. He stood and lifted Priam gently to his feet. He ordered his men to clean Hector's body and wrap it with care. He asked them to treat it as they would want their own to be treated. When the preparations were complete, Achilles returned the body to Priam without condition. He also granted a truce. 12 days of peace for the Trojans to bury their dead and mourn their prince. That night, Priam slept in the tent of his enemy. 2 men, one who had taken a son and one who had lost one, sat in silence, united not by war, but by grief. In the morning, Priam returned to Troy. The gates opened, the people gathered. Hector's body, once defiled, was brought home with dignity. And for the first time in years, the city of Troy was quiet. But it was not peace, only a pause. Act 5. The end before the end. The truce lasted 12 days. During that time, the Trojans held funeral rites for Hector. His body, returned against all odds, was washed, dressed, and placed on a pyre. Priam stood beside it, his face unreadable. Andromache, Hector's wife, mourned with their child in her arms, already fearing the world that would come without him. The people of Troy wept for the man who had carried their hopes through the war. But outside the city walls, the war had not ended. Achilles, though changed by his meeting with Priam, still carried the weight of death on his shoulders. Patroclus had not been buried yet, not properly. The funeral required not only fire, but blood. 12 Trojan prisoners, captured in previous battles, were killed at the pyre in honor of the fallen friend. It was a brutal act, the one that left many shaken, but Achilles believed it necessary. Patroclus had died wearing his armor. The burial would be just as serious. So when the fire burned low, the ashes were gathered and sealed. Achilles wept as they were placed in a golden urn, waiting for his own ashes to one day join them. He had no illusions. He knew his fate. He had made a choice long ago to live briefly and be remembered forever, or to live quietly and be forgotten. He chose glory, and glory demands a price. The Iliad ends not with the fall of Troy, but with this quiet in-between space, a breath held before the inevitable. Everyone knew what would follow. Achilles would die, killed by an arrow guided by Apollo and shot by Paris. The Greeks would build a great wooden horse, leave it as an offering, and pretend to retreat. The Trojans would bring it inside their walls. That night, Greek warriors hidden inside would emerge, open the gates, and destroy the city from within. But none of that is in the Iliad, because the Iliad is not about victory. It is not about strategy or tricks. It is about the cost of war, not in land or power, but in fathers and sons, in grief and pride, in honor and wrath. It is about a warrior who could not be stopped until he was. About a prince who gave everything to protect his home, and about a king who dared to beg for his son's body. It ends with a funeral, not a triumph, and perhaps that is the truest way to tell a war story. You have now heard the full story of the Iliad, told in full with clarity, emotion, and truth. You didn't fake read it, you understood it. Subscribe for more. Comment the next classic we should retell. We'll read it so you can fake it.